and this is just going great. Alright, I gotta plug this in. Hello, testing. Who tests microphones like that? Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Park and Block's Turtlenecks over tea. Today I'm not wearing a turtleneck, however, today we are drinking a jade citrus mint tea. If any of you are wondering why my hair is like this, it's because I just microneedled and I don't feel like looking extra red. It's actually not that bad. Alright, let me fix my hair. Alright, and we're back. Hair is done. I was about to say did. Let me fix my camera. Oh my god, this is truly a tragedy. Not a Greek tragedy, but somewhere in the middle. Man, I have to leave the house soon for a hot date that's not hot and is also not a date. Don't know where that leaves us, but anyway, let's get going. So, I know what you're thinking. What are we even going to talk about today? Well, if you've been following up on my Instagram and my Facebook page, you know that we are going to be talking about vanity and vanity in the fashion industry and how that is frequently misconstrued as also being narcissistic. It's a very narcissistic and very vain industry to be in, to have an interest in, and we're going to dissect some of the arguments for this particular issue that the fashion industry sees itself in, and we're going to take a look at it, and we're going to dissect some of the, I would say, misinforming things or the misinformation, and also take a different perspective on what fashion is, the fashion industry as a whole, and if you do dress up and take pride in the way that you look, does that make you narcissistic? All that and more in the next, I don't know how long this will take, but not too long. And the amount of times I've not plugged in my microphone and started talking is actually pretty upsetting. But without further ado, let's delve into the myth of Narcissus and Echo. In short, Echo falls in love with Narcissus, but Narcissus, he just really wasn't having it. This is the classic story of unrequited love, both Echo and Narcissus. And Echo proceeds to pine over Narcissus until her body just withers away and only her voice is left. Before this encounter with Narcissus, she was actually cursed with a muzzle, which allowed Echo to only speak the tail end of people's sentences as replies. So if Narcissus was like, "Back away, Echo, I don't love you," she would only be able to reply with "love you." So again, the tail end, and this also explained the nature of how Greek mythology served to explain things that people didn't really have a scientific answer for. So the echo, pretty much if you heard an echo, that was Echo speaking, sort of beyond in the underworld, still sort of making echoes happen, essentially. And so to keep on going though, the deaths of these figures is reflective of their tragic flaws. So Echo, eventually, Echo became sort of a manifestation of her curse. And so we still, when we hear echoes, that was the Greeks' way of explanation of why we still hear our voices after the sentence has been said or after a word has been said. And we'll further discuss Narcissus. What? Possession of Narcissus. Narcissus. That took me a while. Narcissus stops for a drink at a small pond, and this is after Echo goes off and dies and becomes an echo and just a voice. So, R.I.P. Whatever. Stops for a drink at a small pond. Upon gazing at his own reflection in the water of the pool, he hopelessly fell in love. With who? Himself. Hence the name Narcissus, if you didn't catch on yet. Unable to capture his reflection, Narcissus stays by the pond until he starves to death. In other renditions of the story, Narcissus actually almost disintegrates and shrivels up into a small speck of dust. This was meant to symbolize that he sort of, because of him and his own actions, he actually sort of caved in on himself. And so what does that really have to do with fashion, you may ask? I thought it was a pretty cool segue into vanity and narcissism, since that is the topic of today's discussion. And so the myth of Narcissus and Echo exhibits an excellent picture of the true essence of vanity and narcissism, the often debilitating and obsessive nature of perception which leads to demise. The fashion industry has been in consistent scrutiny of promoting and profiting off of those two very real and very sneaky vices. But is it valid? And see, that's the question we're going to take a look at today. But how do we even go about answering that? Well, let's take a look at fashion in its essence. See, that's why we have tea, so we can hydrate. Although green tea is... Does it hydrate? I don't think it does. Anyway, down the hatch it goes. Let's take fashion in its essence. Fashion's main purpose, if you think to hunter-gatherers and our pretty much just our ancient ancestors. Fashion's main purpose was to serve humility, and this was after religion came about, where humility was more stressed, protection, and basic homeostatic or keeping up with homeostasis, essentially, so regulating your body temperature. And these were basic needs of human beings. Warmth, tradition, protection were all notes of clothing for survival-based needs. As culture evolved around the world, beginning with early civilizations, body adornment became a staple of self-expression, which powerfully emulated a way of life, crucial aspects of a homogeneous culture, and even evolved to match changing beauty standards. And beauty was obviously different across all of these cultures. So what makes current times so different in fashion? Well, the answer is just not that simple. Sorry to break it to you, but commercialization on a mass scale, certain pesky aspects of marketing, and simple human psychology is really partially to blame for the perfect storm of scrutiny towards the fashion industry and just fashion in general. So the question comes about, does a person who dresses above all expectation pay special attention to their outward appearance? Does that make them more susceptible to narcissistic behaviors? Or, if you think about it, or does this question in itself, the one that I just asked previously, a byproduct of what fashion markets and marketing of fashion clothing has done to our human psychology? It's a little mix of both, and we're going to discuss this a little bit further, and keep in mind the tale of Narcissus and Echo. Consistently, all aspects of this discussion brings up the argument I've mentioned before. Despite not having concrete, scientifically backed answer to these pressing questions, taking a look at how we respond to ad campaigns brought forward to us, specifically in the lens of fashion, reveals to us a sort of like a microbiome of supposed narcissism, which surprisingly, arguably based on the discussion here, we may all have. Now, let's take Daddy Narcissus to discuss this point a little bit further. If we think of all physical objects, beings, or whatever it may be, Narcissus simply was unamused by all of them, until he looked into that river, which quite literally reflected all things which he loved, adored, and fantasized about. I mean, talk about swoon. And now, replace yourself with Daddy Narcissus, and replace all things, objects, being, etc. with brands you respond to well, want to emulate, are inspired by. When you look at this brand, you almost feel like a personal sense of connection to it. And this is essentially what I'm talking about with Narcissus. When he looked at his own reflection into this pond, he looked at it in a way that encapsulated everything which he adored. Which, I mean, if you think about it yourself, is a pretty ballsy and asshole way of looking at things. But you picture the point here. If you were to look into a river and see all of your loved ones, all of the things that you care about, you would stare into it for hours. Especially, I mean, if you lived in Greek times when there was nothing to do but eat grapes and chat around. Oh my god, oh fuck, how much I would love to sit down with Daddy Aristotle, God, I love him. My God, or fucking Seneca. So when we take it back to specifically aspects of clothing brands and fashion industry, some trends that are popular nowadays have been the body positive, political or activist stance. Aspects of the body positive, political or activist driven, artistic, minimalistic, all draws part of ourselves which we may find most pleasing to ourselves, or the best part of ourselves. We see a reflection of ourselves and gravitate to it and are repulsed by ads or portrayals of things that that absolutely are not like us. Just like Echo was to Narcissus. Narcissus just hated the fact that he was echoing everything back to that she was echoing everything back to him. Oddly, maybe, there's an extended metaphor in there somewhere, but we take it at face value. So essentially what we're seeing with this sort of what I guess I would call it would be the sort of antithesis of ourselves, things that we don't stand for, is pretty much just the unrequited love of a missed target market by these fashion companies or fashion industries. And so we grow with the scrutiny that people are doing bad things, oftentimes conflating the way that ad campaigns are run, the clothing offered, is almost an attack on your personal being in some way, shape, or form if we take these things super, super personally. However, fashion is indeed an art, and so we must take it subjective. Art is supposed to speak volumes, and so does fashion. And we see ads to us that seem vain, I should say, like twig models half naked, dark clothing with no substance, or even skin-clad clothing. And if we add aspects such as commercialization, pricing, exclusivity, and the social aspects of a brand, that in mix of our culture, in mix of the conditions that we grew up in, with technology and everything like that, we paint a more complicated picture of what a brand actually is, especially a fashion brand, and what the clothing actually means. So you take this one small issue and magnify it 10 times, and we see a reflection of the times. And that's what fashion was way back when. It is what it is right now. And so we, like Narcissus, are drawn to reflections of ourselves, what we stand for and what we symbolize. In essence, fashion draws this parallel of moral subjectivity and at oftentimes polarizing interests. Cheers. And to that is the end of the sort of mix of Greek mythology to sort of not necessarily answer the question of does fashion make us vain, because obviously there are psychological factors. Growing up in the social media cacophony that we are currently involved in, there are many aspects, and obviously I'm not going to dive deep into narcissism and aspects like that, but something to take into account is to think about what we're being fed on an ad level and why we respond to things the way that we do, specifically when it comes to outward appearance and fashion. This concludes the first episode of Turtlenecks Over Tea, and as always, with love, Park and Block.